Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into GamerNode, and I'm Eddie Inzauto, your editor-in-chief, and I just want to let you know before we get started with this Kickstarter preview that I will be giving away a copy of Dungeons of Infinity, and you can stay tuned until the end of the video for the details there. So it is the copy that I'm showing you right here in the video. It's a prototype and it'll go out just prior to the Kickstarter to get you a little bit acquainted with what Infinity and more are offering with Dungeons of Infinity. So stay tuned for that, and of course, enjoy the video and the run through here of Dungeons of Infinity. Hey, Eddie Inzauto, GamerNode.com, and today we're taking a little preview look at a prototype copy of Dungeons of Infinity. Now, this is a game from Infinity and More, which I believe it's their first, and it's going to be hitting Kickstarter either in May or June, sometime around there, but we got an advanced copy to take a look at it and give it a try. Now, this is clearly a dungeon crawl, and it has a few interesting gameplay mechanics and design elements that make it something that you might be interested in checking out. Here we're looking at a preset campaign. Now, the game comes with this scenario and mini campaign guide, and typically players will be starting on a single tile with an additional stack of tiles. All of these would be on this stack, and we would be moving using action points and exploring new tiles. So for example, if we were here in this tile all by ourselves, we might choose to move this way. You'll always be moving to the sides and forward, and we'll flip over a tile and we'll get tile number 8, subscript 2, then move in. And we have these handy dandy room content charts, and this is this game's particular system of telling players what they'll find in every new room. First, you'll have one of these room content charts, and they vary. Each will have a different order of items found in the room, and different number sets to tell you which tiles will have you draw from which of the game's risk decks. And this varies quite a bit. There are 4 different cards and they are double-sided. So in this case, we're looking at tile number 8, and tile number 8 said well, whatever it said. It said a floor covered in mist. We would draw this floor covered in mist risk card, and it would say something like, "You are covered in the mist. Fear begins to course through your veins. You know how dangerous the mist can be. You wait. You wait. Nothing happens. It's just fog." But that's unlikely that it'll be a nothing happens card. There are pretty big decks of risk cards, and there are 4 different ones. And there are tons of things that can happen to you. Usually in the mist you'll encounter some enemies, or maybe you'll find something. And there are treasure risk cards, and pile of debris risk cards, and body risk cards. And each one of these has a corresponding token. If I moved in there and it was a treasure room, I would put the treasure token on there, or the pile of debris token, or the body token, or the mist token. That way, you would always know what's in the room if you should leave and come back, because some of these things have everlasting effects throughout the campaign. As you can see here, this preset dungeon has all of those characteristics preset with the rooms. If you do run into enemies or something, you may have a chance to sneak past them without engaging, and in that case, you would take whatever card that was, and it wouldn't be a scroll obviously, and you would put a marker on it and on the tile so that when you come back you know what to reference. And I think that's a pretty cool way to keep those things organized. So I mentioned action points, and that is how players will be taking their actions throughout the game. Each character has a certain number of AP, and that will allow you to move and explore these different piles of rubble and treasure chests and bodies, and the floor covered in mist happens automatically. And action points will also allow you to do a variety of other things, including engage in combat, take attacks, use particular abilities that each character has in their personal deck. This one is for the wizard. Each of these cards may require a certain number of AP to use. And pretty unique to this game is some of these cards have an AP meter. You have a limit to how much AP you can use in one round, on one turn. And sometimes you might want to use some of that AP that's left over, per se, if you don't really have much to do, but you want to plan ahead. You can drop one of your player cubes on these cards, and it will save up the amount of AP required to use this ability. So this one requires 3, but you can store up to 2 on there, so when you're ready to use that, you can just drop that last AP and fire it off. That's a really interesting aspect of the game. And also, a lot of these abilities, almost all of these abilities, have a scaling effect. So here you see, if you're a level 1 and you use this Fire Darts ability, it does nothing. So you can only use it at level 2. At level 2, it'll have a power of 8, a power of 9 for level 3, a power of 10 for level 4. So these things automatically level up with the player. And I think that's an interesting way to allow you to keep abilities that remain relevant throughout your playtime, as opposed to giving you things that you just can't use early on, or having you outgrow particular abilities. Instead, your character grows in strength and improves those abilities as they grow in strength. And to do so, there's an experience track. Players will be going up this experience track, gaining experience points as they go, and you'll gain experience points pretty regularly. If this attack hits, gain an experience point. When you make a regular attack on an enemy, you gain an experience point. You cast this spell, you gain 1 experience point. So this seems like a pretty big track because you don't actually gain experience from killing an enemy. You gain for your individual actions. So by incorporating that experience system into all of your actions, it makes this move at a steady clip and at a good pace. So you would hit this 10, and you would get to go up to level 2. You would then also use this color-coded cube track to increase your maximum health stat based on your level 2. And that goes up, and you'll always gain your health back when you go up in experience. You'll also notice on these player cards, there's a boss event section. What does that mean? So this means that every time on your turn, if you do one of these actions, there's a chance that you will attract the attention of the dungeon boss. And the system that they put in place for that are these boss events, and there are boss event cards. And these cards will come out on every turn on which you perform an action that is listed in your boss event section. And then, depending on what number is on this card, that will determine whether the boss shows up. So if this particular tile number has already made it to the table, the boss will show up on that tile. And once the boss is out, you'll find another set of rules here that indicates how the boss character will move throughout the dungeon. So it's a built-in AI system here. So say the boss is out already, if this card comes up, that boss is going to move 1 tile toward the closest tile where there's combat happening. Had that card come out with the board setup that we currently have on the table, the boss would appear over here on tile 12 subscript 2. And that would be pretty terrifying and dangerous because the bosses are very powerful. And the game includes a whole stack of enemy cards. We have an entire deck of basic enemies, many duplicates because you'll be encountering a lot of these enemies again. And there is a smaller deck of boss cards that are terrifying because they're all pretty strong. And then there are 3 dungeon boss cards, and they are immensely strong, and you never want to talk to them. Combat is an important aspect of this game. However, it's not as important as one might think. I found that this game was a lot more about the exploration than the combat. Or perhaps it was just the way that I played, because I tried to avoid combat because it scared me. So in this game, if an enemy or group of enemies appears, they will be what the game calls attached to a particular character, meaning they're actively engaging in combat with that character until they are pulled away by another character attacking. And players will compare their stats. It's pretty mathy. You just kind of compare numbers, and I mean mathy in the sense that you're just messing with numbers. You're not rolling hits and defenses on custom dice. It's a D20 system, so it has to be math-based. You'll be rolling your hit chance. So in this case I have a 14 hit chance. I would roll and I would hit based on my hit chance versus the enemy character's hit chance modification stat. So if I were fighting this werewolf, I would have a -2. And then I would roll my die. And if I get below the hit chance number, I would successfully hit. At which point I would have to compare my power and any modification of power I have based on weaponry or abilities to this character's defense number. In my case, I have a power of 3. They have a defense of 3. I literally can't hurt them. If I had a weapon, I might do 1 or 2 damage. Or if I use a card that has a stronger power, i.e. if I used these fire darts for a power of 8, I would be able to then use my 8 power against their 3 armor and utterly obliterate their health of 3. And then that enemy would go away. In the same vein, if an enemy were attacking a player character, we would use their combat skill here and compare it to our defense. And 9 versus 3, if I had no other defense, I would lose 6 hit points right off the bat like that. Again, they would have to roll. They would have to roll their hit chance of 18, which would be modified by my AP of 4. So they would need to roll 14 or less, which they would. Of course. Who doesn't roll a 14 or less? And that's the way that combat works. There are a few other nuances to combat that come into play when you're using your abilities or trying to escape fights or even fighting with other players in the dungeon. And generally, players will be exploring each dungeon tile by tile, as I said, drawing from this tile stack and exploring out from their initial location blindly and discovering whatever they find. Usually everything is pretty dependent on the risk cards that you draw, and that sort of fuels your adventure. It's a lot of searching, a lot of moving and searching through the dungeon to grab what you need. And then you would play until you achieve some sort of end scenario condition. In this first setup of the campaign, you don't know what that condition is at the start, and you'll have to find a particular event card that will drive the story forward. And I think that's pretty cool. It's an interesting way to play. I kind of like the campaign a little bit better than the straight scenario version of exploring tile by tile, which is odd for me, because generally I do like to reveal the dungeon as I go. But in this case, I found that I was really doing a lot of moving and searching and moving and searching. So this campaign scenario is a really nice thing to have, and I really do appreciate the way that works. It gives you a little bit more of a narrative focus and a little bit more of an immersive experience. One other thing that isn't present actually in this campaign scenario is each setup begins on this starting tile, and this starting tile has a merchant on it. There's a merchant waiting at the beginning of every dungeon, and you would stock a merchant market at the beginning of each game. You'd pull out random cards from the top of your store deck, which are items, and then some weapons. And each player would start their very first turn by using the coins that they start the game with to purchase whatever they might need. So I have the warrior over here, and these aren't exactly warrior weapons, but maybe I would grab these sandals of silence for a coin because you draw one less boss event card after your turn, and that would be great for the warrior because he is such a loud and clanky sort of character that he has to draw a boss event card for combat movement and if he decides to run. So I might buy that, and I might buy some Scroll of Silence, I might buy an Infinity Scroll, I might buy some rope, because sometimes events occur where the floor might cave in, and if you have rope, bam, you can place that to navigate that tile. Then that character would buy his stuff, go about his turn. The market would then say he took a couple of things. The market would then be refreshed after his whole turn, and the second player would have new stuff. And great, the wizard is now able to buy an axe and ring mail, which doesn't help her. She would buy this staff and pay some gold and go about her merry way. And each of these items is usable by a particular type of character. If you look here, you'll see that on her body, the wizard can only use robe-type armor and staff-type weapons and sandal-type shoes, whereas a warrior can use axes, knives, swords, shields, armor, Sabatron sandals, axes, knives, and swords. It has more options and different options based on their character class. Each character also has a particular inherent weakness. For example, the wizard is weak to ice and poison, the warrior weak to fire and poison, and certain enemies and certain effects will include that characteristic and might cause you extra damage. And certain abilities that players have will have those characteristics and will cause extra damage to some enemies based on their weaknesses. For example, the werewolf here deals fire damage and is weak to poison and ice damage. So Dungeons of Infinity has a variety of interesting design elements that make it a little bit different from what we've seen on the market so far. I would like to see a lot of the scenarios fleshed out a little bit more, and I do think that it's important for players to use this game, if they're playing with the regular scenario-based setup, as sort of a game system as opposed to a game that is custom built for them, because these risk decks are so large they can become diluted by stuff that will make the game variable and interesting and mysterious, but might not provide for the best game experience. So you might want to go through these risk decks and set them up, balance them for what you'd like to see come out in your game. And in that way, using it as a game system, you can end up having a really fun time exploring and encountering these crazy different things that can happen, from events to enemies to discoveries of items and gold and all those things. And I like that. However, the way that it is in its basic setup, it can be a little too freeform and not guided enough. But again, it does include these campaign scenarios to help players who want that sort of experience achieve that. I did fail to mention that in addition to those risk decks, there is a giant reward deck, and you do get various rewards, which are generally items, from defeating enemies and sometimes from some of these risk cards, usually the treasure deck. Otherwise, that is essentially the majority of Dungeons of Infinity. We have other things like rock slides that can happen, blocking your path, leaving you no other option but to dig out. You can make noise to attract other monsters. You can find particular item enhancing orbs that you can use to install into weapons. You can sneak. You can use rope, as I said. You can do a variety of things, and you can send for more items at the merchant. This is actually a countdown timer. When you ask the merchant to find you a particular item, it will count from 3, 2, 1, and it's available in the merchant. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and I think dungeon crawl players might find that this is something that works for them. Anyway, that's Dungeons of Infinity. It's coming to Kickstarter May or June. There's still no firm date, but it's well on track. You see we have a good prototype here, and you can keep an eye on that. You can follow Infinity and More, Dungeons of Infinity on Facebook. We'll throw that link in the notes of the video, and you can get on their mailing list and be notified when things are happening with Dungeons of Infinity. Furthermore, we are going to be giving away this prototype copy. I'm going to get it all packed up, and we're going to set up a contest, a giveaway campaign, and you'll be able to enter to win this copy by engaging with us on social media, engaging with Infinity and More on social media, and doing a number of things to get you entries, and then we'll draw a winner, and that'll be sometime as we get closer to Dungeons of Infinity's Kickstarter campaign. And we will get this game into someone's hands ahead of production schedule. That'll be fun for them. Alright, well, thanks for watching. This is Eddie Inzauto, GamerNode.com, and Dungeons of Infinity from Infinity and More. Until next time, keep it here. Keep checking out our Facebook at facebook.com/GamerNode, our Twitter at twitter.com/GamerNode, or at GamerNode, and of course on the website at GamerNode.com. Thanks a lot. Have fun out there. We'll see you later.